I had been a traveling dyke that was rather homeless, and I would go around. I worked in doing theater and film work, and I didn't have a permanent address, but I would go around and, you know, land in different places and work for some period of time and then move on. So I think it was in late, I have to look at my notes because mind like sieve, and I was traveling around so much I can't remember where I was, so I wrote it down. So in the early spring of '83, I was in Louisiana working on a film, and which is a whole different story, but it was a very, very difficult project. There was it was very difficult. It was difficult in a lot of ways, but there was, you know, as can be expected, you know, a punk dyke down in Louisiana working on this film, and I was in the position of being a supervisor over a whole bunch of people, and it was an extremely racist and difficult position it was just hard to work with all these folks. It was just very, very difficult. So I ended up leaving that job and went down to New Orleans to recuperate after I left. And I was in New Orleans, and, you know, I thought, why am I staying in the South? I mean, I need to be up in the North, you know, where there's not so, you know, the issues are similar but different. And so somehow I got from New Orleans to New York City, and I can't recall exactly how I did that, but I just had this really big job and had a lot of money in my pocket. I mean, we were paid really, really well, and, you know, I was glad that I was, you know, getting some money in my pocket and everything. And it turns out that I ended up living on that money for like a long time, like a year and a half or 2 years or something, which is only made possible by the fact that I was living a lot at the peace camp. So, so I went up to New York City and was staying with a friend up there, and heard through the grapevine that there was like some street action that was going on where these women were like camping on the sidewalk to kind of publicize that there was going to be this women's peace encampment. And I'm like, no shit, that sounds totally great. I totally want to go do that. And I'd been involved in working at Michigan Women's Music Festival, and probably it started at like the California Women's Music Festival in the late 70s, and started working at the Michigan, you know, for long periods of, you know, for the whole course of time that workers would work, like, what is it, a month or something, in like 1981. So I had all that experience. So when I heard about the Women's Peace Camp, I could immediately, I just could visualize what it could be. And I got so excited about it. And it turns out that there was going to be a meeting in a regional meeting in Albany, an organizing meeting in Albany, fairly soon. It was either that weekend or the following weekend. So I actually wasn't even in New York City very long. So I found out who was going to be there, and or who was going from New York City, and I called all these women. You know, I called a bunch of people to see if I could get a ride, and no one would give me a ride. I was so fucking annoyed. I was so annoyed. I mean, I don't even know if I should name names. But anyway, I know exactly who the people are that wouldn't give me rides. And so I was like, well, but I felt so strongly that I needed to be there that I figured out that I decided to hitchhike from New York City to Albany. And I don't know, I can't even remember how I managed to do that. I mean, how do you hitchhike out of New York City to get to Albany anyway? So, but I must have figured out some way of doing that. So, and in order to do so, I left my, I left part of my stuff in New York City. I almost always travel with my tools, so I must have taken some of my tools. You know, I toolbox, and you know, maybe some of my clothes, maybe left my backpack or something. Took a much smaller little parcel of stuff with me so I could actually hitchhike. And I left New York City, and as I recall, I probably left like not very early in the morning. I probably left at night, because I remember arriving in Albany in the middle of the night. So this really nice family picked me up. I mean, I was like, you know, just a terror to look at. I mean, I was just little punk thing with, you know, my hair all choppy up and raggedy up clothes and leather gauntlets on my arms, and you know, I was just, oh my God. But the straight family picked me up, family with kids, somewhere along the way. It was like pouring rain. They probably picked me, I was probably like a drenched little rat on the side of a road or something, you know. And it was raining. It rained all the way to Albany, and so they take me up to Albany, and I think I figured out, I mean, I knew Michelle Crone, so I think when I got there, I called and went and stayed with her. And I mean, I knew her vaguely from Michigan and things like that. So I went up there and, you know, finally made it to Albany for this meeting. Got there like the day before kind of thing. And then all these people showed up, and they had to break into, you know, and I didn't know what was really going on. I mean, all the women that were, I mean, this was like the final organizing meeting before they got the land. So they had all been working together for quite a period of time. And I went and, you know, kind of got him, you know, was trying to listen in and figure out what was going on and what the plan was and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out they all divided into different committees. There was the, you know, the committee that was making the encampment material, brochures, like the printed materials. There was the committee that was doing publicity, and I ended up being with the logistics committee. I'm like, I know about shovels, so, you know, so I went and got on the logistics committee, and and that committee was, and I think everybody was meeting like in different places around town. So the logistics committee was meeting in Michelle Crone's backyard, and if I recall correctly, somebody's backyard at any rate. And it, you know, so we were kind of like counting how many shovels she had in her backyard, because we knew we were going to need shovels and stuff. And so we already knew we were in a desperate fix because we didn't have any money or anything like that. So, you know, even early on, we were raiding everybody's tool sheds and everything. So we did that, and after the meeting ended on Sunday, you know, well, the announcement was that that they were really close to actually taking possession of the land that they were going to have it on. That was the big news at the meeting, that they had found a place to have it, and that they would be taking possession of the land really soon. It was like within a week or something like that. And so I thought, well, you know, I don't really, you know, I was in Albany. I didn't really need to go back to New York City, except my stuff was there, you know, my extra pair of jeans or something. And so I thought, well, I guess I could just go up to Ithaca, because, oh, and then the other thing is I got interviewed for, there was a couple of positions open. Oh, I forgot all about this. There were a couple of positions open for logistics coordinators. There were a couple of paid positions for the whole encampment. Not very many, and they did not pay very much. But there was, I think there was like an office coordinator position, and you know, they needed somebody to do logistics and things like that. So I decided, oh, that's right up my alley. I mean, you know, I just came from doing this massive job down in Louisiana on this film, and you know, that's what I do, is I supervise things being made. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to go up to Ithaca. I'll get a ride up there, and then I can you know, go get started in work and everything. So I get a ride. So, and here is how the future of all things is. The person that I decided to get a ride with was Shad Reinstein. Yes, horns blowing and everything. And at that point, she had the tiniest little piece of shit car. It was like, I don't know, it was like a rabbit. It wasn't a rabbit, but it was the same exact style. It was made by some other company, but the one of those little rabbits where literally your elbows can touch each other. And so she was sitting right here next to me, and we drove from Albany to Ithaca, where she lived, and then the peace camp was just about 20 minutes or so 30 minutes outside of Ithaca. And so I remember sitting in that car, there was my first real, I had actually met Shad several times, she reminds me. But this time I was sitting in a car right next to her, got to talk to her for hours and hours. And I remember thinking, I know this has nothing to do with the peace camp, it just has to do with my life. I remember thinking, as I was saying, gee, I wonder what it would be like to have a relationship with her. So anyway, now I'm trying to find out. I've made it my lifelong mission, apparently, to find out. Anyway, that's just a little aside. Anyway, Shad was kind enough to give me a ride, whereas before I had to miserably hitchhike in the pouring fucking rain from New York City to Albany. Now I was getting a ride from Albany to Ithaca. So we get to Ithaca, and it's like Monday night or something, like, we went to her she had a little apartment there. And so the next day, within a day or two, I think, it might have even been the next day, I remember getting a phone call or calling the people that had interviewed me for the logistics job, and I hadn't gotten it. I could not believe what a mistake they had made. I could not believe it. I'm like, don't they know that I am the perfect person for this job? I couldn't believe it. And I remember writing in my journal that, I was so upset. I was positive it was because I was a punky butch dyke, and, I really looked very different than most of the organizing committee. A lot of them were church-based people, a lot of dykes, a lot of, peace act, anti-nuclear activists and stuff like that. But I felt like I was just so different than everybody else that was there. They gave the job to somebody else. I could not believe it. I said, they don't know what they're doing. This just makes it clear to me they don't know what they're doing. I'm going to go up there and do the job anyway. I was just like, you all don't know what you're doing. You need me. I know how to do this job. I'm the one for it. I'm just going to go do it. I don't care who you hired. I'm going to go do it. So I did. I went, so in the next, let's see, so I think they got the land, it was right within that week. So I'd only stayed down in Ithaca like a couple of nights, and then Shad drove me up to, we all went up to, maybe there was going to be a meeting with the police, maybe it was that famous meeting with the police department or something. I wasn't involved with that because really I knew very little about how the whole thing was going to happen. All I knew was that I knew how the structures and the system should happen for the whole thing. So they all went off to do this meeting, to announce to the community that they had bought the land and, what they were going to do and do that whole thing. And I went to this newly purchased land, and the grass was like up to your knees. It was just really thick, and an old falling down house and falling down outhouse and falling down barn and falling down garage. And that's, oh my God, this is what we have to work with. So while they were gone, and I'd of course taken my little backpack. I always took my little backpack with me everywhere. So I went up to, there, and they had their meeting, and I decided that I would just stay. They'd bought the land, and I didn't really have any, it was as good a place as anywhere else to stay, I guess. So I decided, I think Shad had this dog with her named Valentine, and we decided that Valentine and I could stay at the land, and they'd come up like the next day or in the next couple of days or something. So we did, me and this dog. So I decided, I'm like, okay, where am I going to stay in this house? So, you know, I have to say, I wasn't a country person either. I mean, you know, I grew up in San Diego. It's not like a urban living or anything, but I mean, was not used to living in the countryside. I mean, I worked at Michigan and worked, you know, on the land and stuff like that, but never had, you know, wasn't really used to living in an old farmhouse or anything. So I'm like, okay, where am I going to stay in this house that looks like a safe place? So I decided I would sleep in what turned out to be the pantry. And it was a room. So the house had been built, the house itself had been built in the 1800s, and what was just a regular, in upstate New York, they built all these houses, just square little house. And then over the years, all these kinds of places would have additions put on them. And this one, they put out the back door. I mean, it didn't have any plumbing in the house. I mean, it had water coming in, but no gray water going out. I mean, it had no plumbing parts going out. So they put there's been this addition put on the back of the house that was for like cold storage, and the little room that I decided to sleep in was actually built directly over a cistern, which is like a well. And it was like, when was it? Was it March or something like that? I'm looking, May. No, yeah.
Yeah, well,
in May.
It didn't close until May.
Yeah, May. Mid-May. And it's still cold in upstate New York in mid-May. So here I was, the one place I decided to sleep, I had a little thin sleep. I mean, this is a whole story about my sleeping bags and everything, because I'd had a good sleeping bag, had been stolen. My travails preceding this whole event is just a lot. So I think in Amsterdam, I had bought this little sleeping bag, and the damn thing was like a kid's sleeping bag. It was really thin. So here I am trying, and it came up to like here. So like my head stuck out. I mean, I didn't even have like any way of getting inside of it really well. But it was cheap, you know, and I needed something cheap at that point. So here I was sleeping in this, you know, on this thin linoleum floor, probably a couple of boards under it, and it's over like frozen water. It was like sleeping over a frozen pond or something. And I was like, this is not so good, actually. So me and the dog, we were sleeping in this little tiny room off the back porch there. And so that everybody comes back, and I said, I'm just gonna stay here, you know. So there I was wandering around the land for the first few days all by myself, the grass up to my knees, and I'm like, well, people are going to be showing up, so, you know, we at least have to have a sign on the, you know, I was determining what we needed to have immediately. I mean, from absolute nothing, you know, just absolute nothing. I mean, there was like nothing there. So could I, you know, so I found a little can of spray paint and a little board somewhere and made a little sign that says this was the peace camp and put it out at the mailbox there. And I think the women in New York City had come up with this, the symbolism of the women's sign, the women's sign, the peace sign, and then the little tent sign. I think the women doing the little street action in New York City had come up with that, because certainly I could not have come up with that all by myself. So I made a little sign and went out on the front porch there. And are we at a half hour? No? Okay. And, you know, just went to try and figure out what was, you know, what we had to work with there, and, you know, how awful everything was. And so and then, you know, slowly but surely other people started showing up. I think Michelle Crone showed up really, really soon after that. She came to help, and, you know, and we had little work crews that started. I mean, a few people would show up every day, and we just started organizing them. And, you know, still I had no job. But I think eventually somebody came around and decided that I could get paid for what I was doing or something, since I was being kind of bullheaded about it. I can't remember. I mean, you know, I think Michelle Cronin and I split the job, but I don't think she was the one. I mean, I don't think she was the one that got the. I don't know. I can't. I totally can't remember. I totally can't remember, and I don't know if they took it or didn't show up. I mean, I just don't remember. I just remember I was so upset about the whole thing. I thought, oh, these damn straight women. I had started as an activist a long time before. I mean, just kind of got thrown into things. And by this time, I'd already helped start the Billy DeFrank LGBT Community Center in the South Bay in San Jose area. And I did that, I think, in 81. We were organizing for doing that. And, you know, in the years prior to that, I'd been part of, you know, Anita Bryant protests and against her view on gays and being an orange juice advocate, you know, the spokesperson for orange juice. And a variety of different things, but mostly in building women's community. You know, I'd been involved in, you know, Michigan Women's Music Festival and helping, you know, put the festival together, and had been, you know, had always worked with community-based theaters in working with volunteers and increasing people's skills and things like that. I mean, one of my, you know, and would work in the backstage and scene shops and stuff like that, and would, you know, my jobs were always teaching people how to do things. And in Louisiana it was the same thing. I had really pretty much a whole crew, you know, 50 people that, you know, had no skills whatsoever, and, you know, had to teach, you know, show them how to cut boards, how to measure, how, you know, how the houses, you know, how things were going to go together that we were building, and things like that, set locations, and building, you know, building roads and all of that kind of stuff. So that mostly my experience, you know, I hadn't come out of an anti-nuclear background. I'd come out of more of a women's you know, lesbian empowerment and community building background already. And I was 20, let's see, I think I had my 25th, I was either 24 or 25 right then. I thought I was so old, though.
You know, did you have a sense of how big it was going to be, or how many porta potties you needed?
Well, you know, we were really lucky to have a good team of logistics people around. I mean, Shad lived in Ithaca, but she was up at the Peace Camp all the time, you know, trying to knock some sense into us and what we were doing. Because otherwise it would have just been, I mean, I really remember working with Michelle Crone. I can't remember if Carolyn Mao was there already at that point. I wish I could remember everybody's names. But anyway, it was a very small crew, and it seems like miraculously there was somebody showing up all the time. And on weekends there'd be more people, and I mean, it kind of was a little dribble at first, and we were kind of like rattling around by ourselves, but you could tell something was happening. You could just tell something was happening. I mean, it was just, we had no idea how many people were going to be there, but our job was to make, you know, the organizing committee, the organizing group had decided that they wanted to have a legal place for people to stay, so that they, you know, and of course the preceding information on all this is that Greenham Common had been going on for probably a couple of years by this point, and that they were on a common in England is a common piece of ground. It's like a park, sort of like a park here, and anybody could go and stay there, but so could the police could come and bulldoze the place down every now and again. So it was not necessarily a safe place for, you had to be of a certain kind of person to be able to go and withstand the Greenham Common experience, because the police were known to come and bulldoze the entire encampment down. So the women that were involved with the peace camp, with the Seneca Women's Peace Camp, knew this information, and they wanted to make a place where all different kinds of women could come and feel safe, that they weren't going to be arrested just by virtue of coming to the peace camp. Because some people could make the choice to go do civil disobedience and whatever, but other people that just wanted to be supportive would be able to come and not, be thrown in jail for just being there. Now, what that means is the location of the peace camp is in a sacred area. The Finger Lakes area is a very sacred area, and it's been known for thousands of years, hundreds, and just years and years of having all kinds of different sacred things that have gone on there. The Iroquois Nation is there. There's all different kinds of things that have happened in that area. The Seneca, there's a women's museum up in Seneca Falls. There's just a lot of things. That area is just really known for being a sacred area, and I don't think it's any small thing that it was so successful. The location was just perfect. It was a grave mistake for the military to put a nuclear arsenal in a sacred land, I think. And so therefore, the power that would come from women coming there, it would just be I think it was just made to happen, that it was in a sacred area, and it was just it would happen that women would come and, try to change that and be successful in it. I think, certainly we had no idea that we would be successful, or we didn't know that there could even be an outcome, really. We thought, we want, this to stop. What does that mean? We never really spell out what this needs to stop means. I think that some of the people up in Rochester had a good idea. They had a plan. They would like it to be transformed into something else that has benefit to the community and things like that. Of course, I think it's turned into a prison now, so that's not necessarily a benefit to the community, but whatever. Women would be showing up all the time at the peace camp. So we were always just trying to keep one step ahead. In New York State, Woodstock had happened, that famous rock concert, and after Woodstock happened, New York State came up with these incredible, miserable rules that you had to follow in order to have a mass gathering or a big camping kind of thing going on, because they never ever wanted to have a Woodstock happen again. And so they just came up with, the biggest list of rules that you had to follow, which would technically make it impossible for most things to happen because they were so ridiculous. You had to have, certain amount of pressurized water within, so many feet of each campsite, and so many, toilet facilities within so many feet of each campsite, and, fire department ingress and egress, and you had to have, so much water pressure and so much water, and dumping tank for RVs, and RV parking, and and we would just look at each other. We're like, we're so not going to have any RVs coming to this thing. We could send them over to Sampson's State Park to do that, but we had to pretend that we had all of that stuff. So we were really lucky in that this fellow that was up in Rochester, and I should have looked up his name before this interview, but he he normally would go to third world countries and help build water systems and stuff like that. And this summer, instead of going, he taught up at like Rochester Institute of Technology or one of those kind of places. And this summer, instead of going to do work in a third world country, he decided that we were his third world country. So he spent the whole spring drawing up plans and revising them so that we could go to the county and ask and try to get our permits issued. And so, you know, and then he would revise them, and it turns out, I think Shad probably already told you this, but it turns out that, you know, all the guys that were in charge of the health department and everything used to be his students. So they sort of had to approve of his plans. Me and Shad and Michelle Crone spent a lot of time working with this fellow, trying to come up with plans that were kind of that we kind of could follow but cheat on. And so, you know, we'd go to like the local salvage yard and buy a big tank kind of thing, and there was a little well between the garage and the barn that, you know, that we needed to fill in anyway, or somebody would have fallen into it. He had boards over. I mean, it was really old-fashioned stone well. So we took the boards off, we dumped the tank down in there, we put some gravel over it, made sure the little spigot thing stuck up, and told the health department that that was our, you know, dumping tank for RVs. You know, and we knew we were never going to ever use the darn thing. You know, and it was totally not functional, but it looked like, you know, I mean, you know, and even the county, you know, the state knew that we weren't going to be using the darn thing, but they're like, okay, you have a holding tank. So we would do things like that, but that was much later in the process. I mean, that was really getting much closer to July 4th, which, you know, we never did get the permit. We got the permit literally the day, you know, July 3rd or something. But you know, so here we were jumping through hoops for months, and they just were refusing to give us the darn permits. So, but you know, so the question was actually, you know, when would people come and stuff like that? I mean, you know, here's Michelle and I mean, I'm sure it was Michelle and I. Here we are at the peace camp. There's like nothing there. There's nothing. I mean, you know, there was nothing. There was not a chair to sit on. There was not a table to work on. There was not. I mean, there was nothing there. I mean, it was an empty house. I mean, nobody can imagine this anymore because, you know, we all have the vision of everything just being, you know, just so much junk everywhere. But there was nothing there. There was nothing there. There were a few odd things in the garage, and the barn had a few odd things. But the barn, and I'm sure Michelle told you this too, that the barn had been a chicken barn. And it was full of years and years and years of chicken droppings. Thick on the floor. I mean, it was, you know, inches thick on the floor. Just years of chicken droppings. But, you know, here's Michelle and I mean, you know, we need you know, we're, in addition to trying to set up the camp, we're also trying to set up an office for us to work in and other people to work in. So we're trying to do that. And the only thing we can find is like this rotten table in the barn that is just totally like covered in chicken shit. So we get out, we find something to scrape it off with. You know, we scrape off all the chicken shit and everything, and we haul it into the office. You know, we dust it off, do the best we can, and we haul it into the office. And, you know, we would look at each other all for the next couple of years, you know, on and off for the next couple of years, definitely through the first summer. And we would look at all these city women working in the office on this desk that we knew that we had brought, you know, all these, you know, more proper people than us working at this desk that we knew had been completely covered in chicken shit. And we always called it the chicken shit desk, and nobody else ever really knew what we were talking about. We're like, take this over to the chicken shit desk. Anyway, so so we really had to work a lot with the junk that was on hand. And then, eventually people in the neighborhood, in the region, when they came, they would all bring trucks of stuff, and they'd bring trucks of food. And as it got closer to opening day, more and more people would show up, and we would design, buildings for people to be, the pavilion out in the back, the backfield to have meetings in, and we designed the kitchen areas and all, because that was all part of the bigger plan about how the whole thing was going to work that we were putting into the state, the county and the state to get our permits and everything. But it was amazing because people would just show up. And then and I left actually before, a bunch of us left to go to Michigan Women's Music Festival, and we were not there for the Waterloo March and the August 4th, August 3rd, August what? Whatever that August event was, August 1st, something. We weren't there for all of that stuff because we had gone to Michigan and we're doing publicizing in Michigan, and consequently, after Michigan happened, like busloads of people came from Michigan to, they'd heard about it at Michigan, and so came over to the Peace Camp in mid-August through September. But it was amazing to us because, we would be sitting in the office and we would hear about people that were showing up. And, Shad would be at meetings with the town supervisors and the police and stuff. And they would be announcing, well, what are you going to do with all these women that are coming from Minnesota? Oh, women are coming from Minnesota, they would say. Oh, we just got our information in all different manners of ways, which means that they were really tracking things at that point and that we had no idea of. I think we were very naive. I think we were all very naive. When the Peace Camp opened, my passport was stolen, and it was just like, you just couldn't keep track of the people that were in and out, and everybody had access to everything. We had no hierarchy, so anybody could do anything, anybody could say anything. It was just a complete free-for-all, which is great. It empowered many women. The free-for-all feeling was like, oh, I guess I could do this too, and that was good. And but it was crazy. So the whole story about getting the permit, I should finish that little bit, is that we never did have a permit. Here we are, opening weekend. We still don't have a permit, but people are showing up. And then there's the famous Bella Abzug story about where she is sitting in the kind of in the closet. We had maybe a couple of phone lines. She had both phone lines going. She had both phones up, phone receivers up to each ear. She's got that big old Bella Abzug hat on and sitting. I think somebody took a photograph of that at some point, and she's sitting down there and talking to the State Department. You better give these ladies a permit. They're coming. They're coming here. You better give them a permit. I mean it. You give them a permit. I don't care what it takes. You give these girls a permit. And sure enough, our permit showed up within a few hours. So we needed to have a few heavy hands on that whole thing. So every weekend was, there was so much happening. All I had was just a massive list of chores that had to be done. And as people would come through, we we determine what kind of excuse me. We determined, whether they wanted to do kind of work in the office or cooking or whatever kind of work they wanted to do, and sent them out, sent them over to do those sort of things. So, we would have different chores that needed to happen. Just naturally, there was just, a progression of things. The list was always pages and pages long. We could send some people to wherever it was that they, we could deal, easily with 50 people showing up, we could give them all jobs, believe me. Or we could deal with 3 people showing up. It didn't matter. We had lists of all kinds of tasks that had to be done, and we could supply them with the nails and hammer and show them how to saw a piece of wood, or show them how to make phone calls and try to get food or whatever. But they would do amazing things. I mean, I saw the most amazing things happen when at the peace camp. I mean, we needed to build a we built these giant porta-john things, and then we realized that we had extra concrete, that when the truck was coming we were going to end up with a few extra yards of concrete. So I'm like, okay, let's build, we need to put a concrete pad under the kitchen area. So we built this little kitchen area, and we had a little bit of extra gravel, so we put some extra gravel down in there. I mean, we would have things, we had so no money. I mean, Michelle Crone literally was carrying the money around in an envelope in her pocket, and trying to get Michelle to part with any of that money was like, it was like crazy. I mean, I felt like I was like, I don't know, it was crazy. She just controlled that money so much. She would make me do every single thing I could in order to get the stuff for free before she would part with any of the damn money. I mean, for a project that made so much money, I mean, we did the whole thing with no money. Nothing. I mean, I think our little budget was like $250 or something. It was like nothing. We had no money in that little envelope. And we were trying to do the most miraculous things with it. So we needed to fix the U-shaped driveway. We would have shale brought in, but instead of getting good crushed shale, we would get cheaper big chunk shale, and then we would give everybody sledgehammers and make them break it up. We're like, oh good, here comes 50 women, give them sledgehammers and hammers. So they'd be there with big sledgehammers and little hammers even, breaking up the rocks in the driveway so that people could actually drive around on it. I mean, we were just cheap. I mean, we're just like, okay, if we can save a couple of bucks. We have plenty of people power, we have no money. So we would do that, and then we would have, so I remember when they came and they poured the concrete for the outdoor toilets. We had that extra concrete, so we had them pour, and it was late at night by the time the whole thing was being finished. And we had made a square and like a pad area where we would have the kitchen area. And we had put some gravel in there, and then they poured the concrete over it. And in New York State, as I was to learn, you need to have really thick footings for things, for concrete pads and stuff like that, because it freezes and frost heaves and stuff. So I was, we had put down just a little, we just put some 2x4s, or I don't even think it was 2x6s, it was probably just like 2x4, scrap 2x4, and made a square enclosure for the concrete to be poured on. Put down the gravel, the concrete got poured over that, and then we realized that it had to be smoothed out. So, I didn't have anything to smooth it out with. I mean, I'm like, okay, well, you guys can use boards and kind of, smooth it out and stuff like that, but you have to make it smooth because people can't trip on it and everything. So, and then something else came up, and I went to work on another project, and I came back, and it was late, it was dusk, it was, pretty late, and here's these women with pots and pans, I swear, with pots and pans, smoothing out, with the bottom of the pots and pans, smoothing out the concrete that was drying. I thought, that is the smartest thing I have ever seen. That is just pure genius. They just said, well, we have pots and pans. All of them with the pots and pans, smoothing out the concrete, reaching as far as they could with these bottoms of the pots and pans. I thought that is just pure cleverness. But the most amazing thing about that damn concrete pad thing is that, it was very thin. It lasted for decades. It's still there, and it has not cracked or anything. I cannot believe it. It reasonably so. It should be much, much deeper. It's just a thin layer of rock and a little bit of concrete over that, and the damn thing is still there. Never cracked. I thought it was going to break up after the first winter, and it never did. It never did. I was just truly amazed by that whole thing. So we had lots of projects. I mean, you know, we had pumps that had to be put in. I mean, miraculously, women would show up from Vermont that knew how to put in farm pumps, and they would plumb the farm pumps. And, you know, we needed water systems, so we invented big tank things that, you know, so somebody would drive down from Rochester with this big ass, huge round tank that could, if a puff of wind had come, it would have lifted the whole truck and moved it. And we just, it came together pretty good. I mean, we just put everybody to work.
What was the most frustrating part of it?
The meetings. I think the most, you know, well, I mean, you know, I was always frustrated because, you know, I realized that, you know, we're not going to be able to take care of everybody if we didn't have facilities to take care of everybody. And I felt like, you know, my work was constantly being sabotaged by meetings. I mean, those women could sit around and meet for days on any given subject when, you know, who cared what came out of the meetings? You know, if there was no water running by the time women showed up, you know, we were going to have a major health problem. So, I mean, I think, you know, I think it really became I think for me anyway, it became really a battle between the thinkers and the doers. You know, there was a whole group of people that were, and you know, we need all of it, but at the point in my life, I mean, I just felt like, oh my God, you know, there's so much to do. I mean, I'm not going to go sit in a meeting. I mean, I have some of those notes from those meetings, and I'm just like, Jody storms out of the room. I mean, it's just, you know, they could just meet and discuss and theorize, and certainly most of those people are now PhDs and, you know, teachers and, you know, brilliant people. Brilliant women. I mean, they were great. But at the moment, I was thinking, oh my God, you know, we need to actually get the damn stuff built. I am so, you know, I am not going to sit and discuss this for even 10 minutes. I don't want to do that. I am so sorry. Again.
And I don't like this white piece of paper that's right behind your head. You think?
Okay, make sure you get me taking it down.
I don't really like that light switch either.
One moment while I fix the microphone material.